Welcome back to Now and Then. This month, we're talking about a few things that on the surface feel pretty different. We've got microplastics in packaging, sardines are having a moment, and we've got AI in wellness. So basically, a very normal month in our industry.
Definitely sounds very normal for our industry. And I think what connects all of these stories is that they're really all about how quickly expectations are changing across the whole ecosystem, meaning expectations from brands, retailers, consumers, and even regulators.
Rapid change. I think that is probably the theme for this episode. The industry is moving fast, but questions underneath are becoming more serious. Like we've talked about this a lot. Who do people trust? What feels credible? What feels safe? Even what is worth paying for? And where do brands need to be paying close attention?
Okay, so let's get started. Maybe we'll start with the regulatory headlines and then we'll get into what we're seeing in the trends.
Let's do it. With affordability as a top concern for Canadians, the Bureau is looking to understand whether a lack of competition is actually contributing to higher prices and fewer choices at the grocery store. And they are looking, from what I understand, at the entire food supply chain.
Yeah, so the Competition Bureau has launched a public consultation. So they're inviting any Canadian consumers, Canadian businesses, industry associations like CHFA and other stakeholders to provide input. They're also planning roundtables and meeting across sectors over the coming months. The goal is to identify barriers to competition and ultimately make recommendations back to government on how the system could work better. It's interesting timing because we're also seeing broader conversations across government about improving efficiency and reducing barriers. In Health Canada's recently released departmental plan, the department reiterated its commitment to regulatory modernization and more agile and risk-based approaches to oversight. So while that's a separate initiative altogether, it does reflect a common theme, which is looking at where systems can work better for businesses and doing that at the same time as continuing to protect Canadians.
And I would say from like a CHFA perspective, the Competition Bureau investigation is an interesting one because our members really span the entire supply chain, something like I know we're really proud of as an association. And we represent ingredient suppliers, manufacturers, brokers, distributors, and retailers. So we know there's a lot of factors that influence how products move through the system and ultimately reach consumers. And many of our members are small and medium-sized businesses, and understanding the barriers that they face as well as opportunities to improve competition and market access, I think is big.
Yeah, in its notice, it does point out that competition isn't just about keeping prices in check. It's also about creating opportunities for new market entrants or supporting innovation, giving consumers more choices as well. So when the market becomes concentrated, it can become harder for smaller and especially emerging businesses to compete effectively.
And we know from our earlier discussion that competition isn't the only factor that it can influence food prices. This examination signals it is a worthy factor to explore and definitely something for our industry to follow. Any conversation about improving competition has the potential to affect innovation, health food, organic, natural, specialty products, like helping them get to market. And if the process helps identify barriers that smaller businesses face, it could create more opportunities for a more competitive and diverse food ecosystem in Canada, which is really great.
So the consultation period runs through the summer, and the Bureau expects to publish its findings and recommendations in the spring, I guess next spring. So those recommendations could go on to influence future policy decisions that affect really everyone in the industry, from anyone from a food manufacturer to a distributor to retailers and even the consumers. So once again, of course, CHFA will be keeping an eye on the consultation process and any opportunities for industry to participate.
Amazing. Okay. I feel, again, story of our podcast, always a lot going on. What did I say? Rapid fire or something was the theme of this podcast. So we're going to flip to another story that caught our attention this month. And this was a Greenpeace study around microplastics in baby food pouches. And I know it caught my eye when it came to my attention because it's technically about packaging, but the bigger conversation is really about trust. Again, another theme we talk about a lot here.
Packaging is becoming a much bigger part of consumer trust conversation. It's not just like, is the food formulation clean? And by clean, I mean like free of,
Yeah, free from.
artificial flavors, colors, all of that. Or is the product produced in a sterile environment? Now it's also about, what is it packaged in? What is the packaging made of? What happens to the packaging after it's used? About recyclability conversations. And then also, are there any risks that this packaging presents that people weren't previously thinking about?
Yeah, and I think baby food is such a sensitive category.
Mm-hmm.
Parents are already reading labels, they're thinking about ingredients, they're thinking about convenience and thinking about safety. And so when a story like this comes out, even if there's still more discussion to be had around maybe the methodology or the risk levels, it can change the way people feel about an entire format.
Yeah, and I think that's the key point. This kind of story doesn't stay isolated to one brand or one product, right? It can influence how people think about the whole category. So it can influence how people think about pouches more broadly, plastic broadly, and packaging claims
Mm.
more broadly. For brands, it reinforces the need to be very thoughtful about packaging decisions and the way those decisions are communicated to their consumers.
And I think it's also connected something to like that we've talked about before, that shoppers are getting more sophisticated, but they're also getting more skeptical. They may not know every regulatory detail, but they are definitely asking better questions.
Yeah. And I think this skepticism is healthy. It pushes the industry to be clearer and more transparent and more accountable, which I think is at the heart of this industry anyway. It's just reminding the industry of those things. And it also means brands need to be prepared, right? If you're making sustainability claims or safety claims or any claims that could be interpreted as better packaging, you need to be confident in how you support that.
Totally. And I think the thing I was thinking about with this story as well is, convenience is still incredibly important. And I know, especially coming back to like the baby food pouches, I know people are busy. Like I'm not a parent, but I see my friends in action and they're juggling multiple children and pets or whatnot. And I don't think anybody's pretending that pouches didn't become popular by accident. But convenience alone is, again, another thing we've talked about a lot is it may not be enough anymore. If people start questioning what the trade-off is, something like the packaging, should I care more than I should care about convenience? So I think it's a really interesting study and another interesting conversation to keep our eyes on as well. Okay, do you want to move into something a little lighter, but still very telling?
Sure.
Okay, sardines are having a moment.
A moment. Okay, I have to say, I did not expect sardines to be on our 2026 trends list, but let's hear it.
I have to say honestly, I don't know if I knew this either, but I'm here for it. I love sardines. Since everyone and everything needs to be maxed right now, we are definitely in the era of sardine maxing. Tin fish board, sardines for breakfast, the whole thing. And I think what is really interesting is I don't actually think it's just random internet behavior. I think it actually tells us something about where food culture is going.
Okay, how so?
Well, okay, a few things are happening at once. You know, we've talked about accessible luxury or little luxuries or little glimmers, depending on how you want to call them. And I think sardines have this affordable luxury quality. It does maybe feel a little elevated, especially if you get the fancy tinned fish. Like, I'm not just saying like grocery store ones. So, little elevated, but still accessible. I think the second thing is they hit on protein, huge trend, as we know, but also omega 3s. They're super convenient, pantry friendly eating. And third, I think it actually fits into a broader move away from overly sweet flavor
Mm.
profiles and towards more of this savory, salty, briny, umami flavor that I've been seeing pop up.
That part's really interesting because we're seeing that across categories. It's not just sardines. It's like pickled flavors too, and savory snack plates and salty toppings, goat cheese, chips,
Right.
as a base for more complex snacks. And then all of these flavor combinations feel more maybe adult.
Yeah.
more textural and a little less predictable.
Totally. Have you heard of girl dinner?
Oh, I have not heard of
Okay.
girl dinner.
Okay, well, I'll explain it to you and everyone listening. But girl dinner is this like way of eating. It's no cook, it's snack like. You combine all of these small portions or like I said, snacks, and you kind of piece them together to make a meal. And so what I would say is I think this feels, again, coming back to trends, this is like an evolution of this girl dinner, maybe with a bit more of intention behind it. People really want this low effort way of eating or making their meals that feels curated, and then they're hitting on these flavor profiles that they are craving, like you said, the salty, the pickle, the tang of the goat cheese. And I think for brands this opens up a lot of opportunity in snacks and condiments and ready to eat formats, um, dips, crackers, functional foods, and even merchandising. Like I think you can really think about it in different ways than just like quote unquote snacking.
It sounds like maybe it's also connected to that value conversation. People may not be going out to eat as much, but they still want small moments that feel a little bit special.
Totally. I have to say, like, I think the at home experience is a huge theme. As I mentioned with the sardines, I love sardines and I love making a seacouterie when I'm celebrating. So,
Charcuterie.
seacouterie, yes, exactly. And I think, not about me, but maybe for people listening, I think brands that can deliver on flavor, texture, and convenience that give you that like sense of discovery, I think people are going to have a lot of fun with it. You're going to have a lot to work with there. Okay. The other flavor piece I wanted to mention, and I think if anyone's listened to the pod before, we may have mentioned that at CHFA, we follow this platform called WGSN. It's a global forecasting platform, and it's really interesting to see where things are trending across the globe with different consumers. And they have released their spring flavor forecast for 2028. That may feel very far out, but it's really exciting to get this bigger picture idea of where consumers are headed with food, beverage, and with wellness in the years to come. Some of the flavors that stood out, I think, get ready for this: carrot cake, aesthetic rose, mango lassi, and green plum.
Interesting. I love a good mango lassi.
Me too.
I can't place aesthetic rose on my palette, but I'll have to wait for 2028, I guess.
Yeah, like I had to look it up to be honest. I can't either. Like aesthetic rose is a little bit of a combination of that visual, like that pinky, dusty rose color mixed with that rose flavor that's very, I would say, more popular in like South Asian or Middle Eastern cuisines. So my only real big experience with rose is a Turkish delight my grandmother fed me when I was
Mm.
a child, and it really didn't resonate with me. But my flavor palettes have changed, and so like maybe it is worth investigating again to see if I like it. I don't want to cut myself off. But for the other trends, I think we look at carrot cake, it feels very familiar, and you have that spice, that creaminess, that warmth, that comfort. And so I think we've talked about this not on the pod, but something I've been paying attention to as well, like especially people on GLP-1s, they're like craving those kind of those flavors without actually like eating the sweetness. So the spice, like you know what I'm talking about, the spice in
Ah.
carrot cake is really resonating with people.
Hmm.
Like I think in fragrance, it's called like more of the gourmands, that creaminess. So interesting that that one came up. Mango lassi, obviously, we both really love it. I mean, I feel like who doesn't love a mango? So that makes a ton of sense to me. Definitely global inspiration. And then you get that like tang, I find, from like the dairy or the kefir, however you make it,
Hmm.
right? So I think that's really interesting. And then I don't know about you, but I've never had a green plum. But again, I read about it. And I think, again, it speaks to the demand for sour, sharp, and those kind of like, I'm saying, like back of your mouth watering flavors. So very interesting there. Have you had a green plum?
I don't think so.
Yeah, me
I
either.
don't think so.
It's our summer mission.
Um,
We've got to go try a green plum.
yeah, all interesting combinations and not necessarily about chasing those exact flavors, but about watching for the signals that combination of those things kind of sound more global, have a global inspiration and have those indulgences that we were talking about before.
So yeah, I think the bigger takeaway is, like you said, don't chase exact flavors, but I think coming back, flavor is doing a lot of work. It's not just about taste, it's about mood, it's about culture, it's about nostalgia. It's about that visual appeal I was mentioning with the color, and also like that social shareability and just how food visually looks, and how it shapes our feelings about it.
And that actually connects really nicely to CHFA Toronto, because a lot of these conversations are going to show up in real life at the show.
Yes, it's one of my favorite things about the show, getting to see everything in real life. Like you said, CHFA Toronto is where these signals become tangible. For anyone who is new to the industry, CHFA Now Toronto is happening in September 25th to 27th. It is Canada's largest trade show dedicated to natural, organic, and wellness products. It's where the industry comes together, from emerging founders to established brands, to showcase new products, connect with retailers from across the country, and build relationships that move the industry forward. And it really is the place where all of these conversations come to life. Whether we're talking about savory snacking, functional beverages, or growing demand for cleaner ingredients, it's one thing to discuss trends. It's another to walk the show floor, to see what brands are launching, to hear what retailers are asking for, and experience where the excitement and the momentum are building. Across the trade show floor, in conference sessions, and at special events throughout the weekend, you'll see firsthand how these consumer shifts are shaping product innovation and influencing what's next in the industry.
And this year, there are a few conference sessions that feel especially relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah, so we have the State of the Industry session, and this is going to be a big one because it gives members a broader view of where the market is going, and what actually happens if we just kind of accept the status quo. I'm really excited for this one because it's a collaborative effort. It's bringing together our industry insights at CHFA with those from our partners at NIQ and MMP. We're also looking at sessions around ultra processed foods, which I know is something that you've really been leading, and how that conversation could become a much bigger issue for the food industry.
Yeah, definitely a session for food brands and manufacturers to check out. Ultra processed foods are a consumer concern that is gaining attention quickly. I've already started hearing the term come out of mouths of, I would say, the most unexpected friends and family at summer barbecues. So I'm convinced that the term is already headed towards mainstream. It wouldn't be the first time, though, that the public conversation started to define a term before industry had fully aligned on how to respond. But the session will explore the idea of what ultra processed foods are, why they matter, how evolving consumer expectations are beginning to reshape product development, branding, and retail strategies. I will examine with our presenter where shoppers are most sensitive to processing and where brands face the greatest risk and potential opportunities. The session will challenge kind of the assumption that ultra processed foods are only a big food issue, and that they're not present in the natural, organic, and wellness industry. And I would say that they are present even within the natural, organic, and wellness sector, and many products are falling short of what these emerging consumer expectations are. So that creates both a vulnerability, but it also creates a powerful opportunity for differentiation within the industry.
I agree with you. I think it's moving really fast. Like I think I did message you about it. There was a segment on this CBC about it. It was call in, and the people who were calling in concerned or had awareness of it really surprised me. So I think what I'm hearing you say, though, is like, don't be reactive or defensive, just be informed. And because whether we're talking about plant-based snacks, functional foods, kids products, or convenience formats, the question is becoming, how processed does this feel? And do people understand why the product is made the way it is?
Yes, for sure. And from a regulatory and claims perspective, that matters too. The more attention the topic gets, the more important it becomes to be precise in how products are described.
We'll also have retailer merchandising opportunities, and this actually includes one-on-one coaching with Hive and Annie, which is such a practical way for brands to think about how they show up on shelf. And then we've also got our brand schools with sessions from companies like CamPrev, North Coast Naturals, Purity Life, and others, which I think is such a great way to bring peer learning into the show.
Yeah, and that's what CHFA does well, right? It's not just about showcasing the products. It's also about bringing the industry together to make sense of what's changing.
Yeah, especially in a year where there is so much noise, I think the value of being in the room together is pretty high.
Mhm.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of topics, but quickly before we wrap, a couple of things to watch for this summer. One is a piece that we're actually going to be sharing with members on AI and the future of health and wellness. CHFA has been following some work from IADSA, which is the International Dietary Supplement Association, and we're actually members of them. They did a study with Ipsos looking at how AI is starting to influence product discovery, personalized wellness, trust, and even purchasing behavior. And I think the big takeaway from the study is AI isn't just a tech story anymore. It really could change how people find products, how they compare claims, ask health questions, and decide what feels credible.
Yeah, and I'm always here for the impacts on regulatory too, right? Because AI becomes part of how people assess health and wellness information and questions around accuracy and transparency, privacy, really so many things. Accountability just
Yeah.
becomes much more important. So for brands using AI in marketing, recommendations or customer service or personalization, this is something to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, big time. Okay, the second piece is our full trust, transparency, and trade off member report. It's coming in July. I know you and I have referenced it a lot on the podcast. This report, it really gets into how people are making decisions right now and the trade offs between price, ingredients, claims, convenience, sustainability, health, and trust.
So whether it's AI or packaging, ultra processed foods, or trade uncertainty, trust is still the thread running through all of it, it seems.
Totally. And so, yeah, more to come on both of those in July.
Maybe that's the takeaway for this month. The industry is moving very quickly, but speed alone isn't enough. So we need to be thoughtful about how we innovate and how we communicate and prepare for what's coming next.
And I would say the good news is that this industry has always been good at spotting change early and adapting. And I think that's what makes it interesting. But the next phase is really about being sharper, like you said, more evidence based, more transparent, and really more connected to what people are asking for.
That's right. And as always, CHFA will keep tracking all of these conversations and helping our members make sense of what it all means for their businesses.
Okay, that was a big episode. We covered a lot of ground, but everyone, thanks for listening to Now and Then, and we will see you next month. Bye.